How many of you here are in marketing? What does that mean?
Developer relations.
Okay,
Yeah.
developer relations. How about you?
Like market communications,
Okay, very cool. Like core marketing.
core marketing.
Very cool. I like that. How many of you work at companies which have an open core product model? Like your core of the product is open source, then you sell an enterprise version of the product. Pretty much everybody? Cool. All right. Then this session will be interesting. This pretty much comes from my personal experience and learnings and knowledge for the last 7 or 8 years worth of working in open source projects or open source marketing initiatives, open core companies where the base of our product is open source. People can download it for free and not necessarily talk to a sales team. But then we sell an enterprise version like HashiCorp, Isovalent. Those are the 2 official companies that I was part of. And then I worked at a couple of other startups who worked a lot with open source foundations like OpenStack and CNCF. So it was pretty fascinating to me to see how the good and bad of open source marketing can be. So that's why I was like, okay, when this came up, I was telling Karim, he's one of my good friends, and this was SPI-driven conference talk proposal. I was really frustrated one day about how awful some enterprises are, or some companies are in general, and how they mix up open source marketing and enterprise marketing objectives and goals and initiatives. It's just a hot mess. I was like, if only I had an opportunity to talk at conference. And then Open Source 101 popped up the next day. I was like, yes, this is it. And it took me 5 minutes to put the proposal together, and it got accepted. So here it is. So the theme of the day so far has been pretty much keynotes. The subsequent talks, they have all been about collaboration. We live in a collaborative world. Open source is all about collaboration. If you look at the theme even here, whether you take the rainbow or Lego bricks or puzzle pieces, they're not of the same size, shape, color, or design whatsoever. Everything comes from a unique perspective and unique design, unique angle. They all fit together to solve that puzzle. My favorite is the one in the center. Karim was the one that introduced me to that structure, but my kid, I bought 2 structures, 2 sets, gave one to my kid and kept one for myself. I built the one like that because the instructions told me to build it like that. My younger one, who was 11, I think at that time, he mixed up the colors of the people. He was like, no, people are not monochromatic. So he put one colored hair, one colored up the top half, and the other colored bottom half of the colors, and people were all colorful. And he's like, now this looks more realistic. So again, it's about improvisation and everything, but it comes down to collaboration and understanding that we all come from different places. We all come from different backgrounds and experiences and expertise, and no single opinion or no single point of feedback is wrong. Yes, there are some wrong things to do, but for most part, we need to listen and appreciate the feedback that we get from every single person in the room. That's what collaboration is all about. Now, companies, we all work at different sizes of companies. You probably are very familiar with this kind of org structure as well. Some of us may have these types of org structures at even companies less than 100 people kind of a size, like at startups, or open source communities where we're just about to start and we already end up mimicking one of these structures of the teams or organizational dynamics where it feels like every team is out there to get the other teams, like Microsoft does, or kind of like Oracle, where the legal team is the biggest of all. Oracle is not a tech company, apparently. This can be also valid on so many levels. This can be the dynamics within a specific team, like an engineering team might end up seeing these kind of dynamics, or a marketing team can see this kind of dynamics, or these dynamics can manifest across the teams as well, across the functional groups. A marketing team versus engineering team versus sales team versus customer support, all that jazz. So traditionally, enterprise, I didn't want to go to 8-point font, so there are a lot more teams in an organization, but I wanted to simplify it in broad strokes to engineering, research and development, product, DevRel and community, marketing, sales, and pre-sales and post-sales. It's kind of like the life cycle of a project or a product. And for this purposes, let's just focus on the marketing team because that's where my experience and my expertise comes from. I'm not going to touch anything else. I do have one slide that talks about the DevRel team and community team, but I'll get to that when I get to that. So for the enterprise, let's talk about the enterprise marketing for a quick few minutes. We know about the open source marketing and how that should work, but the premise kind of traditionally started from the enterprise marketing where companies wanted to sell a product that they made and make a successful, viable business out of it. This is the typical marketing journey that we go through as individuals, but also as a marketing team. This is the journey that we put the audience through. First is awareness, where we introduce the product to someone, introduce the company name, saying, hey, have you heard about us? Have you heard about this product and this project and all the jazz? Consideration is where we start giving them a little more information on why should you use this particular product and not the 1,000 other that are available in the market. Purchase is all the information that we end up giving to the audience, to our target audience, to make that purchasing decision. Like, what is that optimal or inflection point where they decide, yes, I've heard about this. I like this company. I like this product. Yes, now I'm going to cut a check to this company and use that product. And then I use it so much and so well that I want to become, as a customer, I want to become a reference customer. So as a company, as an end user company, I will say, hey, company X, I've been using your product for so long. I want to now become a reference customer. Can I talk about your product at a public conference? Or can I write a case study about this? Can I work with you to do a webinar or something? Because we want to talk about how well we use your product and how extensively we use it and how we benefit from it. So at the end of the quote-unquote ideal marketing funnel, a marketing team's success kind of lies at the references. How many referenceable customers have you gotten? How many customer case studies are we getting? So each stage of this marketing funnel has its own KPIs and goals, but also most times there are one or two teams that drive each of these stages. Again, I'm oversimplifying. There's a lot more nuance to this, but think of regional marketing or field marketing or growth marketing type of teams that are focused on leading initiatives like banner ads, campaigns, digital campaigns, email campaigns, all the emails that you get from. Those can be from the growth marketing teams that send out those digital content to you so that they are your top of mind. That's the awareness piece. Consideration, product marketing and technical marketing put the content together about what is so special about this product. Like if I'm buying an Apple laptop, what is so special about this versus another Android device or an HP laptop or an IBM ThinkPad kind of a thing. So product and technical marketing put together very specific pieces of content that help us educate about what is this product about, why should I look at this, and if I'm looking at this, should I consider trying it out? And then purchasing is where the marketing teams, like there are a couple more teams that are responsible for creating content in this stage as well. And for reference stage, when the customer gets to a point where they want to become that reference customer, there will be, in, again, larger companies, there will be customer marketing teams that solely focus on setting up initiatives like advisory boards, customer advisory boards, webinars, executive briefings, or the technology days, like day-long activities with the leadership team or the individual product leads and the customer, so they feel like they are getting a sneak peek of the product and such. So there's a whole slew of teams. Again, this is simplification because these are all the sub-functions of marketing teams that work fully in sync in a very coordinated dance or lockstep, however you want to call it, together within the marketing team to get through this successful marketing funnel, enterprise marketing funnel. So when you see this analyst is talking about this product, it could sometimes be because the engineering team has built a very useful and a very good product. The leadership team probably has a great vision for the product. But unless the analyst relations team sets up that meeting with that particular analyst and has the briefing with the lead engineer or the CTO or the CEO of the company, and has that discussion, the analyst is probably not thinking about it. So it's not top of the mind for that particular analyst because, again, there are hundreds of products that they could be writing about. So the AR team, the analyst relations team, plays that kind of critical role in getting this company or this brand top of the mind for that key analyst. Same thing, I could probably go on for each of these teams across the board for hours together. Creative design, like even the open source 101, we have all sorts of kind of themes on the website. Who comes up with the design? What kind of design? How should the design play into the brand of the product or brand of the identity of the product or the company? So each team has a very critical role to play in this enterprise journey. Now let's flip to open source. Oh, sorry, one last thing. These are all the different examples of the things that we could be doing, activities that we will be doing, or the initiatives we'll be doing at each stage, driven either by one individual team or that team takes the support of the other marketing teams. For example, in, let's say, case studies. Other case studies that the company might have, like if I'm working for a vendor, other case studies that I would have published are taken into consideration by a prospect at that stage, but the content that needs to be, the existing case studies have to be initiated by the sales team saying, hey, I have this customer who's interested in doing his case study with us. Marketing team, you handle this. So someone on the marketing team should take ownership of, okay, what is this customer's use case? How are they using it? What competitive solution were they using before they purchased our product? And how are they benefiting from it? Like, what's the value they got out of it? And someone needs to interview the customer in the specific format, prepare a questionnaire, interview the customer, capture the answers, put together the case study in a specific format that is meaningful for the audience that's reading on the website, and then get it approved by the customer's comms teams, legal team and comms teams, and then publish on the website in a very captivating design and also highlighting or pulling out the key highlights of that customer case study. Now, is that possible by just one team? No, it's again orchestration between the product marketing team to understand the use case, probably technical marketing to understand the technical use case, the design team to put the design together, and the brand team to put to bring the specific design for that asset, marketing asset, and tying it with the company's identity. And all of these teams work in sync with each other to put that one-page customer case study that you would see on a website or a printout that you would see. And then that gets used by the sales teams. When they talk to other prospects, they say, hey, we had this similar use case with customer X, and we have a case study published, here you go. And that kind of feeds into that marketing cycle of, we have one existing customer, we are going to use that reference to bring another. So all of these teams work in real tight sync, like all of these enterprise marketing teams work in sync with each other and collaborate with each other to bring this successful journey on an enterprise level. Now, turning it into open source level, if you see the two key changes, these are the two stages that change in between enterprise and open source journey. Enterprise journey has purchasing and reference customer kind of stages, where we need an actual purchase and we need a reference customer. For open source, it's adoption. No one buys an open source project. They adopt it and use it. So it's all about the intellectual purchase or the emotional buy-in that we need from an open source audience. And advocacy is when the best advocate, end user advocate for a project can be those that unsolicitedly give a talk about our project that they're using. For example, GitHub. Someone's using GitHub. And GitHub may not necessarily start the conversation of, can we build this case study with you? But if suddenly, GitHub Actions is probably a better example. If suddenly an end user who's using GitHub Actions suddenly comes up and just does an article or gives a talk at some industry conference about how they use GitHub Actions. And Backstage was another example. One of the other, I think, VMware or there was another startup that did a talk, I forget the startup's name, but they use Backstage for their customer experience portal, and they did a talk at Cloud Native Rejects before KubeCon Detroit. I will add a link to that. But those are the kind of unsolicited use cases that act as advocacy pieces. And again, even here, this is the DevRel play that I kind of dip my feet into. This is the open source marketing journey that we usually see. We have developer advocacy pretty much through the entire funnel. Now, depending on the project size, project maturity, or if the project is owned by a specific company, then the company size and maturity, these roles can be played by one person or by a team of 50 people, depending on the maturity of the project. So it could be one developer advocate going through the whole thing, or a slew of developer advocates kind of trying to split the workload. Same thing with community management. It could be one community manager focusing on onboarding, making contributions easy, and to Angela's point, making code of conduct and response teams, and putting the code of conduct rules and principles together. All of these things can be one person's responsibility, or a team of community managers can be doing that. So again, you see these teams, but this is not all. There are still the rest of the marketing roles, whether a developer advocate acts as a product marketer or technical marketer, or a community manager acts as a higher level product marketer. These are all the different functions that still come into existence when we need to focus on open source marketing journey. So we still need all these different activities. We need to build project web pages at the awareness level. When people hear about our project, where do they come and find it? On the web page, or GitHub README, or both. And the documentation should also exist at the awareness stage, because a project, depending on the project, the audience could be very technical, and they may start at documentation as their first starting point and not GitHub README or project web pages. So do we have docs, the higher level 101 level docs in place? Are there events where we send people, or we have talks to help people understand what our project or to know about it? Are there live stream? Are there Ask Me Anything kind of sessions that help our team connect with the community and bring awareness to the project? Bring, again, at the consideration level, a little more technical, but comparative documentation about this project versus some other technology. Again, it should not be about this project versus that project, but more like, if I'm using this open source project, what other alternatives do I have? Could be alternative technologies, alternative options that we have, and how can we as an open source marketing team provide that information to our audience that this is not the only option, but if this is your use case, this option is probably the best one that you have. Because again, open source should never be about selling. It should always be about educating and letting our audience pick the right project for their use case. So here comes the core of my, the core or the meat behind the reason behind submitting this talk was marketing strategy. As an open source project or as a company, what is your marketing strategy? Be very clear. What is your priority? We have to be very clear, and if we cannot answer this question, then we should go back to the drawing board and start all over, because if we don't know what our marketing priority is it open source marketing? Is it enterprise marketing? Because these are two very different things, and if we do not have that clarity between which one's our priority, we are not going to be successful, in the sense that we are only going to confuse our audience. If it's open source success, then focus our marketing activities to be successful in the community. Build the community, like go through the open source marketing funnel that I just showed you, where we start about the project, we start about educating and get to the intellectual buy-in and build the champions, ambassadors of our projects to that extent. And if the priority is enterprise, then it has to be about supporting the sales team, building revenue and revenue contribution. Now, every team, Kareem and I were also talking about this, every team can be responsible to contribute to revenue. Sure, a developer advocate or an open source marketing person can be talking to a particular prospect and they suddenly decide, oh, you know what, I have been using this, or I've been looking for something like this, or I've been using your open source project, but now I want to pay for your enterprise version of this. So in that particular example, a developer advocate has contributed to revenue. But a developer advocate should not be held accountable to contribute to revenue. Because when an open source marketing team is held accountable for revenue contribution, that's when the activities kind of get muddled up, mixed up, and we lead our open source audience towards selling. Like we start selling to our open source audience, and open source audience can smell the sales pitch miles away. So we did not want to do that. Which is why I have seen companies, I've worked in companies where these are two separate teams. One is an enterprise marketing team, and the other is an open source marketing team. Or the open source marketing team is part of the DevRel team, like it was in HashiCorp when I worked there. It just becomes natural to separate out those priorities. The audience marketing team was my team name when I was at HashiCorp. And audience marketing team success was dependent on the open source adoption, open source project growth, and the monthly active users or the returning users, the GitHub downloads, open source use cases like customer case studies, but on the open source users, all of those kind of success metrics. Whereas the enterprise product marketing teams or the enterprise marketing team's goals were very different. So it comes down to the leadership as well, but also it depends a lot on the project maturity and the company maturity to determine this. But if we don't have the clarity between clarity on what we want, whether we want open source success or enterprise success, it becomes very hard. Now, granted, when the companies start or the projects start, we will be here at open source success. We will want only open source goals to be, we want to only focus on open source success. And then gradually, as the company grows or as the project grows, we would want to build a viable business around it so it can transition and grow into adding on to the enterprise success. So we have to build on the open source marketing success, but not necessarily combine both of those or mix both of those. And knowing the priority also helps us determine the goals that we're working towards. On the open source side, we have project adoption, the community growth, like how many users are coming in, how many are contributing, how many are using our project, how many are talking about it, all of those kinds of things. How well is our project known could lead to different metrics like GitHub stars and such, but how well is our project known, how many folks are taking our tutorials or certifications that we have put out. Is the community a healthy community? Like, are there so many code of conduct violations that most times our community managers are focusing on putting those fires out? Or are community managers trying to figure out how to build more and more champions because we have a small set of champions and we want to build more out of it? Like HashiCorp Ambassadors is a very good program. VMware has a phenomenal program that probably everybody here knows about it. vExpert is a program that has, I guess, lived more than my life in technology, but there are programs like that where you can build on those kinds of ambassador programs. But again, focus on the community growth and success on the open source side. For the enterprise side, it's very specific and tied to the revenue contribution. How many leads are we generating? How are we putting them through the marketing nurture so that are those leads converting to marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, and are we filtering them into the sales pipeline? How many customers are we getting? How many logos are we getting? How many logos are churning? All of those kind of focus or goals are enterprise marketing teams' focus. Like, are we doing enough marketing activities to support the sales teams to get more logos? If there are more logos churning, like if we're losing more customers than we're gaining, then what is the problem? All of those kinds of things are enterprise marketing success. Now, on the flip side, open source marketing team success could also be about, or goals could also be about why are our contributors not staying for a while? Like, we see a ton of new contributors beginning, like they're great first issues, really a healthy amount of good first issues, a lot of people beginning to contribute, but after maybe 2 months or 3 months, we don't see the same people coming back. What is happening? So that could be on the open source marketing team's goals, understanding how our contributors are being taken through the whole journey. This slide is something that is near and dear to me. So our open source efforts can act as your top of the funnel. Like if you remember the marketing funnel that I showed you, the top of the funnel becomes the marketing pipeline, so to speak. And we bring that down, and at the bottom of the ones that we have, or at the purchase ones that we have, we kind of say that, okay, this is the core or the meaningful marketing funnel that we had. And your open source leads, all of the open source leads that have come in can kind of filter into the top of the enterprise marketing funnel. But do not bait and switch. If you have your open source audience coming in, if they choose to remain as open source users, we should not be forcing them to convert into paid customers. It's okay for us to not have paid customers. Our project needs to be successful, so our open source marketing should continue to focus on growing them and nurturing their adoption, and not trying to force them into buying a product. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of examples that we all can think of. But yeah. Understand the starting point. Where is our audience coming from? There may be some audience coming in purely from an enterprise perspective. They can say that, hey, I have used these 5 other open source projects. Now I'm looking for something that I can pay and purchase so that I can get the enterprise features, but also a team that can support me, because I'm tired of supporting this. Me and my team are tired of supporting this ourselves. So please, I'll give you dollars, I'll cut a check to you. Please support this. And in that case, it's perfectly okay to start that set of leads or set of users through an enterprise marketing funnel. However, if they start at the open source stage where they're still trying to figure out what open source projects or what technologies, what options do I have, don't quickly try and put them through the enterprise marketing journey. Understand what their goals are, what are they trying to do, ask questions. We don't know. Most times we will never know what they want to do. Ask questions, listen. Listening is the key in open source. Listen to what they're trying to tell you. Are they trying to look for alternatives? Are they trying to exit an enterprise relationship they already have with a competitor because they're just tired of that and want to go fully with open source? Or are their corporate goals suddenly shifted towards open source, and now they're kind of mandated by their CIO or top-level executives to look at all the open source alternatives? Could be that. In that case, putting them through an enterprise marketing journey is not going to be successful. So understand where that starting point or the first interaction between you and that audience is, and then put them through the right journey. Metrics. Cannot tell you enough about metrics. Engagement metrics could be about the documentation. How many pieces of documentation are they accessing per month? Within the documentation, are there any copy the code to clipboard kind of a thing? Then if they are there, then see how many people are using those types of metrics. HashiCorp also built, I again come back to HashiCorp because metrics is something that the team really focuses on. They built a login or authentication for documentation, but that gives you benefits of bookmarking certain documentation, certain pieces of docs, saying, oh, I want to come back to this, I'm going to star it or bookmark it, come back to that. Or it provides me that kind of continuation. It's a 5-page document or tutorial. I can access or read through the first 2 pages, save it for later, and come back to it maybe in a few days and finish the rest of it. So understand what that journey should be for your open source audience. Figure out how you can possibly give them a very optimal journey based on the metrics. They will never tell you that you're going to use your website in a specific way, but they will show you. When they're accessing it, they will show you what features they're looking for, what sections or what sides of the web page that they're looking for, what types of keywords that they're searching. There's Algolia metrics that has been phenomenal for us at multiple companies, not just HashiCorp, but multiple companies that gave us that kind of, what are the top searched keywords in this particular section of the docs or in this section of the tutorials. Understand their behavior, figure out what they're trying to do, and make it easier for them. And if and when, only if and when the time is right, figure out if you need to start that enterprise conversation with your open source journey. Because at the end of the day, we are all businesses trying to be successful, trying to make money to our companies. That's all fine, but only when the time is right. Assess and see if it's the right time for us to introduce that enterprise conversation there. If it doesn't feel like it, switch back to the open source marketing journey. And use metrics to determine if the time is right. So it's and I say metrics a lot. These are some of the metrics, not literally everything. But for open source, it could be about the project downloads, the GitHub stars to show the contributions, the commits. Some projects also measure the year-over-year, quarter-over-quarter commits, quarter-over-quarter stars, all of those kind of vanity metrics, but that also gives a quick pulse on the health of the project. How many people are actually coming in, how many are starting it, how many are forking it, how many are contributing it, how many pull requests, what's the mean time to response for a pull request within 48 hours, like as Brian mentioned earlier. No, not Brian. Pedro mentioned earlier in the keynote. Respond to a pull request or an issue that was raised, especially if it's a first-time contributor, within the first 48 hours to keep them motivated. So figure out all of those kinds of things, and those are the metrics that could be successful for the open source marketing. There's a ton of other things that we could be measuring, like if you have certifications to adopt, to give badges and to show that kind of stickiness, for example, then let's measure the number of certifications. Are we providing the right level of certifications? Are we providing the right content level, right number of tutorials to prepare people for those certifications? How many are taking these before they take a certification exam? What are the challenges for those who are not able to clear the certification exam in their first attempt? Why could they not clear? Did we not provide the guides or tutorials? All of those metrics are out there for us. So measure that and build a really strong open source journey. And on the enterprise side, it's again traditional. How many leads are we generating? And what's the life cycle of that lead? How are we following it up? How many MQLs, marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads? What's the sales cycle like? For example, anytime on a similar side, on the open source side, you could look at the life cycle of a community member. But on the enterprise marketing side, at least it's very easy to measure. I say easy with a hesitation, but it is possible to measure the sales cycle in terms of when did we start that first sales conversation to when did they give us the money. On the open source side, it might be hard, slightly challenging to measure when did this person hear about our project and when did they actually start contributing, if contribution is that kind of measure, or if adoption is measured, when did they download it and enable certain features, if that is possible. But again, it's kind of like understanding where your priority is, what your goals are, and measuring those to figure out, are we successful or not? As I mentioned, in some companies, there are teams that are separately responsible and held accountable for these things. So it feels like there's a clear line of separation. That also causes confusion sometimes because now both the teams are trying to compete on the same objectives. So these two teams still will need to collaborate with each other and make sure that they're not competing or overstepping on the activities and the target audience. And as I mentioned earlier, each team can be focused on bringing revenue or bringing open source project adoption, but specific teams have to be held accountable for those success metrics. You don't hold sales team accountable for engineering timelines, like how long it takes to build a product is not sales' responsibility. You hold engineering teams accountable for that metric, and you hold sales team accountable for the sales. How many customers are we closing this quarter? So same thing with open source. How many open pull requests are we closing or are we responding? How many stale issues or stale PRs are there? So those are really separate out the open source metrics and goals with enterprise goals, and have individuals that if you have a open core product, make sure that both of your teams are talking to each other all the time. We do not want any kind of overlap or bait and switch kind of activities happening. And lastly, how many of you know what this is? Yes, one person, two. Yes. This is a winter Gatan marble machine. If you have never seen it, just watch a video. Just Google for winter Gatan marble machine. It's fascinating and mesmerizing. There are all these marbles that, I don't know if it's clear here, but there are marbles that go here and fall on at different times on different keys and make amazing music. The whole enterprise marketing or enterprise teams and open source marketing collaboration looks like this. It is very complex and has to be done at the right time, at the right place, and with the right intensity. Marble cannot fall very forcibly. It has to fall with the right speed at the right height to make the right music. So it is possible, if we all collaborate, it is possible to make incredible music like this. But 99.9% of the times, we as teams are miserably awful at collaborating. We don't want to talk to each other. We don't want to work with each other. We go back to being Microsoft, where all teams are out there to get each other. Even as individuals. I mean, their teams could probably be like that, but in most companies, even individuals feel like they're competing with their own team members. So going with the theme of the day, let's focus on collaboration. Let's talk to our fellow teams. Let's talk to our audience, understand what they're trying to do, and how can we help them. That's where I'm done. Thank you.